What up, what up? It's DJ Frosty Freeze in the building. We're going to have a little discussion today. See how things are going. What's poppin'? Be sure to hit that Cash App. Let us know what's going on. We got a treat for you. I got a video to show you today. The video is quite, well, it's a wake-up call, really. But let's get this thing started.
DJ Frosty Freeze. Let the attack begin.
What's up? You're live in the IceBox with your boy, DJ Frosty Freeze, on a Saturday night. I just got done off of Mixcloud. I was doing a mix show from last month over there. We did a fundraiser for Set for Love. Man, we were jamming out some tunes. For those of you that weren't able to make it to that fundraiser last month, we did a show for COVID relief and raised a bunch of money, roughly about $90,000, doing live mix shows. It's called Set for Love, hashtag Set for Love. Welcome. Glad you can make it. Let's see. Be sure to hit that Twitter. You can see everything scrolling across the screen right now. Get on my Twitter page, FRadio76. Be sure to get on my Facebook page. We're getting ready to take down the DJ Frosty Freeze page and go strictly with Freeze Frame Radio. So if you haven't liked Freeze Frame Radio on Facebook, get over there, like that page, get all the news and info, because the DJ Frosty Freeze page is going down. Taking that one down. We're strictly working out of Freeze Frame Radio going forward. I'll be taking that down in the next week or two. I just want to give people a chance to get over there and check it out. What's happening? Let me know if you're in the building. Hit the like button. Even if you don't like what I got to say, like it anyway. It helps me know who's here. We got a couple things I want to share with you. I got a video today that I saw from a lady from overseas that's talking about the current situation in the United States. Protests all over the place. And the one thing that I was thinking about, I watched a little bit today, the NFAC, Not Effing Around Coalition, was in full force in Louisville demanding some action being taken on the officers involved with the Breonna Taylor situation. And apparently there was an accidental discharge of a weapon. If you don't know who the NFAC is, they're African American militia group that is armed, just like our counterparts on the other side there. They're armed, expressing their Second Amendment rights as well as their First Amendment rights, and they ain't shy about doing that. And they showed up in Louisville today, and apparently somebody had discharged a weapon. I'm not sure exactly what happened in there, but something happened. They ended up getting a ambulance out there and moving some people out. So protests going on across America. Portland's been on the map lately. Moms, grandmas, aunties, grandpas now. Just saw a grandpa arrested yesterday for being out there and protesting all that. And he had a big old leaf blower. He said, I brought the leaf blower, a big supercharged leaf blower to blow away the smoke. He said, you can get this smoke, but I'm going to blow away your smoke. Stood his ground. Trying to provide some cover for those out there peacefully protesting. And let's make this clear, because I've been seeing this going around a lot lately. These folks went out there peacefully. They weren't out there, causing too much havoc. I mean, you have folks that go out there and they get in the way and they start a little trouble here and there. But for the most part, these things are peaceful, and they're being provoked by the very people they're protesting, right? So if you're protesting something and you're doing it in a peaceful way, and the folks that you're protesting happen to be the ones that have to protect you at the same time. It gets a little funny. And it seems that there's been a culture of this lately where we've become more retaliatory and keeping our ears shut and our mouths wide open. Um, that can only lead one way, and the world is watching it. They're seeing it. I see it all over the place. I see people making comments about how the U.S. is falling into the same traps that we've seen throughout history. And there's a lady that I'm going to play here in a few minutes that talks about that. Back in the 90s, I don't know if you remember the split, how Yugoslavia split, and you ended up getting the Serbians and the Croatians and Bosnians, Chechens, all these folks that were out there. And these things they always start out the same way, with some type of division. They got to find a way to divide the people, to get the people of one side, usually the side in power, and those that agree with that side that's in power, to create some kind of havoc to get and use force. And we're seeing that play out now. It's happening slowly, but we're seeing it. I mean, I guess to us it's slow because we're not used to looking at it and not used to seeing it, but it's happening in a way that much quicker than I've seen. I mean, we're seeing a lot of the parallels to the 90s with the stuff that was happening in Yugoslavia, and it's starting to happen here. And I'm thinking here, I'm here in Milwaukee, and I'm thinking, why do they think they need federal officers to enforce laws on the streets of Milwaukee when the population is roughly about, I think it's, last I checked, I think it's about 800,000 in the city itself. And the protests have been fairly small here. They're not large at all. And the violence hasn't been that high either, contrary to what you're seeing out there and what you're hearing. It hasn't been largely violent. Most of these things haven't been violent, as a matter of fact. There's a few people that like to agitate, and we don't even know where half of them folks come from. But we like to take the bad stuff and run with it, and we're just not used to what we're seeing right now, and we're seeing a lot of change. And you know how it is when you're used to living comfortably in a certain way, and abruptly it changes on you. That kind of upsets people a little bit, makes you a little upset, and folks ain't sure how to do it, you know. Yeah, I hear you, it's a distraction, but if the distraction outweighs the purpose, then that's where we got a problem. I heard an FBI agent talking today, earlier this morning, and he had an idea. He said, how about you take a few, all the peaceful protesters that are organizing these protests, how about you walk them about a half a mile away from the courthouse, the federal buildings, and then allow the feds to come after you over there. Don't give them a reason is basically what he's saying. Don't give them a reason to make excuses and half-hearted decisions to get out there and tear gas you and bullet you and all this kind of stuff and beating you with sticks. If they have to travel six blocks out or half a mile out to come after you, then what's their true purpose? And we're starting to see a lot of rhetoric on some of these sites, and they think they got these, they have these closed groups out there that are posting things, and pro law enforcement sites and pro right wing sites that are, they're saying some pretty harsh things in some of these sites, man. And I think that worries me a little bit in the fact that, I mean, we're no strangers to knowing that there's bad apples everywhere, right? I don't even like using that term, but the fact of the matter is that there's bad people in every occupation, and it seems like some of those sites have all the bad people in it. And it's all retaliatory. You got to remember something, man. When people are out here dying and being mistreated and not being treated as inclusive and getting the same things that other folks are getting, eventually this is going to blow over. And the newer generations out there today, they just ain't having it. They ain't tolerating it. They're getting together. You're seeing things that you haven't seen in the past. These protests aren't stopping in 2 days. This thing's been going on now for quite a few months. And you throw that in there with COVID-19 and folks dying from that kind of thing, people are starting to lose a little hope in the way things are going on right now. So you see the differences like that, and you figure out what is it you need to do, right? Well, first we know we need to vote, right? Get the people out that are causing this trouble, and put together a plan. Get we hear all these slogans, defund the police and all these different things, but define this stuff. Put it out there exactly what it is you want to do, where you want to put it, and make it cohesive. Get everybody together, get this thing organized, and put it out there. Get on TV, get on the networks, get your spokespeople out there, make this thing happen. And then get the foot soldiers stay on the ground, the diplomats that represent these organizations get on the air, control the narrative, because if you lose the narrative, it's a hard war to fight and win. So that's first and foremost. Get into that. Now, the question I have as I watch these Louisville protests today, and the protests for that matter all over the country, is they seem to be calling these the NFAC, the No Effing Around Coalition. The name kind of makes me laugh a little bit. But I see these posts on all these sites, and I remember watching Michigan and these governors, these state houses, getting bombarded with people with their Second Amendment rights and First Amendment rights, and I didn't say much about it then because, hey, it's their right. If they ain't breaking any laws, they're allowed to do it, right? But now you have the NFAC doing it, and they're being labeled as terrorists. So you got folks labeling one side as patriots, and then folks labeling the other side as terrorists. You might not like the language, but it ain't much different than what you were seeing before. I know they didn't have no 12-year-old girls dancing on stage either, in blackface masks and things like this. So you have to ask yourself what these things are all about, right? So back in January of 2016, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember it clearly. January 2016, an armed group of far-right extremists seized and occupied the headquarters of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. You remember that? You remember that? They stood there, I forgot how many days it was. It was over like free cattle and, being able to graze on federal lands and so forth. And they were in there, I think it was about 2 months. They were in there for quite a bit. And they were armed to the gills, man. They even got care packages. Can you believe that? They storm a federal building, take it over, hold it for 2 months or so, and they were even getting care packages. Not a problem. They let it go. No raid, no FBI jumping in there, no federal forces, no Homeland Security. None of that. None of that in there at all. Nothing to stop that. And at the time I said, is this a terrorist action? Or is this a First Amendment protest? But from what I can see, I don't know. I know they lit some fires and things like that. And I know that one of the police stations pretty much got taken over in Minneapolis. They didn't occupy it, but they basically made it unusable, I guess. And I get that. I'm not condoning any crimes. But what my point is this whole First Amendment issue being equal to both sides, right? So if one armed militia can walk around, take over a building, and hold it for 2 months, and then have the authorities allow them to leave and come and back and forth with care packages so that they could occupy the building longer. And then today I'm watching folks getting arrested for standing outside and yelling including a naked woman. They call her the Portland Athena or whatever they call her. In the middle, and she's getting bulleted, bulleted, tear gas. They're tear gassing moms and grandmas and stuff like that. If all that kind of thing's happening, what's the difference? You got to ask yourself, what's the difference? I'm still trying to figure that out myself. I think it's pretty obvious, but I don't know. Maybe it isn't to some people. Everybody has the First Amendment right to protest and seek redress from their government. And everybody has the right, the Second Amendment right, to keep and bear arms. And for those of you that had fought me on this, and it's unpopular in my circles, but those that have fought me on this and kept screaming about this militia, that the amendment talks about it, a militia and all this kind of stuff, and you wanted to relate that to the National Guard or some other government agency that is supposed to be the militia, I don't see them helping anybody out in these protests. I don't see them stopping this rendition action that they got going on when they're snatching up people and throwing them in these vehicles and carting them off without charging them. I don't see these same folks screaming about First Amendment rights, and some of my libertarian brothers and sisters, I don't see them screaming about the freedoms and the First Amendment right now, about armed African Americans and black folks walking the streets with legal firearms and expressing themselves. I see a lot of pushback on that. I see quite the opposite, actually. And I think we're starting to expose what some of the problem is. If you're being treated wrongly or inhumanely, your only course in this country is to use your rights, to seek redress from your government, and then vote them out if they don't do so. And if they ain't listening, you got to make a little noise. And it seems that this ain't the same old protest of 60 years ago. These folks ain't having it anymore. It's very colorful out there. People are ready to move on from that garbage, man. They want to see change. But the moment we're in now is reminiscent of things in the 90s. I warned you about the Ceausescus and how they rose to power, elected democratically, and rose to power and took that power and just ran with it. I'm going to play you something here in a minute that can give you a little perspective on how this thing can play out. Listen up.
This is my message for the greatest country in the world. In the light of the recent events in the United States, I felt morally obliged to shed light on a very similar chain of events that took place in my country during the 90s. The cause of those events was the same: a constantly re-emerging ultimate evil, nihilistic, non-theistic religion/cult that caused hundreds of millions of deaths in the 20th century and countless suffering. Now, proponents of that religion want to run the experiment once again, and in that experiment, you, people of America, will be lab mice. Not so long ago, I was a lab mouse of dictators in my country. That country was Yugoslavia. Rather than giving you lessons about history of my country, I want to give you the timeline of the events which led to an extremely bloody war and dissolution of Yugoslavian Federacy.
Now pay attention.
I will leave it to you to make conclusions about similarities with recent events in the United States. In the 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall marked the victory of the free world over tyrannical monstrosity of communism across the Europe. However, Yugoslav communists didn't feel like letting go of their precious powers. Since the climate in Europe was extremely anti-communist at the time, they knew they needed a new strategy, an ideology that would seduce the masses and keep the power in their hands.
Before we go further, let me explain to you what's going on here. This was in 1989. Some of you might not be that old, but most of you are. And when they're talking about communists and socialists and all this thing, They're not talking about the far left, all right? This is some kind of narrative that gets hijacked quite a bit. They're not talking about that at all. What they're talking about is the takeover of government and using forces to keep power. Pay attention.
So they come up with a very clever idea, to rebrand the communism in Yugoslavia and to change its name into socialism. Not any type of socialism, but a very special type, the National Socialism. Sounds familiar? The playbook they used to progress with their agenda was already tested in Nazi Germany. To establish National Socialism, you must first install hatred in people. In order to create genocidal levels of hatred, you must divide people of one country in well-defined groups. In other words, you must create tribal or groupthink.
So what groups do you think she's talking about here? We've already seen religion, we've seen ethnicity, we've seen nationalities, the China virus, etc., the border wall. We've already seen this stuff in 4 years. Pay attention.
This can be achieved in different ways. You can divide people by ethnicity, by race, by religion. You can let your imagination go wild. Since Yugoslavs were white and practically indistinguishable among themselves,
oh yeah, and religion.
The only card they could play was the religion card. Yugoslavia was very mixed religion-wise, and we had Orthodox Christian Serbs, Catholic Croats and Slovenes, and Muslim Bosnians. A perfect starting position. In the next phase, you must start making such social policies so terrible that will inevitably lead to the countless individual disadvantages. When the consequences of such government policies become obvious, you must start claiming that the cause of those inequalities is nothing but discrimination and hatred of one group towards another, and naturally, you must start screaming that those inequalities must be corrected by favoring the oppressed, discriminated group over the oppressor group.
Does that sound familiar? It's happening right now.
Enter national quotas for hiring. Now just replace national with race or women. Once the groups are formed and well defined, it's needless to say that all the mainstream media in Yugoslavia were government controlled and were fueling the narrative about mutual discrimination and hatred relentlessly. The growing fear and feeling of insecurity destroyed relationships, marriages, friendships. As fear of discrimination and hostility among groups were growing, people started retreating and isolating within their own groups because they didn't feel safe anymore with the individuals of the other group.
Are you not seeing that today? You got moms getting together, women getting together, men getting together, black folks getting together, every ethnicity getting together, separating, isolating, trying to create their own groups. But the one thing that they haven't expected to happen this time around was all these groups finally starting to come together. Listen.
All of a sudden, staged and very well organized mass protests started all over the country. Protests against the oppression and killing of one group by another. At first, those protests were peaceful, but soon enough, rioting and burning started. Now that you have the attention of the public, you need sparks. What is a spark? A spark is a convenient event of murdering of a random member of one group by a hateful member of another. And you usually need more than one of those.
And see, the police don't even realize that they're being used in this way. These feds are in there and they're doing all this stuff in the name of police work. And the whole issue is, you know, people are fed up with being treated a certain way. So now you've already got that going, and that's been an ongoing thing in this country for hundreds of years. It's not new. You know, you add all these other things to the mix, and if it should tell you something when folks are still out here in the middle of a pandemic. It's got to be real.
At this point, people were still not completely divided. There were still reasonable people left, those who understood we are all one nation under God, and that we will not kill each other under any circumstances. They went out protesting together, singing for peace and holding their hands. But the hunger for the absolute power of socialists was stronger than our love for each other. and shootings and attacks at protesters continued. In the next phase, the tipping point with no return was reached. People started erecting barricades at the entrance of their cities, their neighborhoods, even on highways and roads. Barricades were guarded with armed civilians. Each and every attempt of the law enforcement to remove barricades and to de-escalate the situation was in vain, since they would be ambushed and killed.
Well, that's what the presidency is.
So if you haven't been paying attention, these things are happening. We're already seeing it. What she's saying isn't that old. It happened in the 90s from where she was. She's speaking about Yugoslavia and the Serbians, the Croatians, the ethnic Chechens, and so forth. Pay attention.
Peace couldn't be restored anymore, because headlines, photos, and videos of dead people propagated through mass media became too explicit and horrifying. Even those hardcore idealists who believed in one nation under God, peace and love, snapped under the pressure. At that point, army was deployed to restore order, but they couldn't do much, because they were clueless about who was the perpetrator and who was the victim, simply because there were perpetrators and victims on both sides. In the final stages, even the army was attacked during the negotiated retreat, and 50 or 100 soldiers were killed. And just like that, Yugoslavia found itself in a civil war.
Now, we haven't quite gotten that far, but everything that she's talking about that led up to that has happened, is happening, and it's getting bigger and bigger as the summer weans on. Let's see what else she has to say.
City against city, village against village, family against family, and so on until the whole territories became cleaned of the members of the enemy group. Genocide, ethnic cleansing, relocation of hundreds of thousands of people were everyday news.
And they're already talking about putting people on different sides of the country and separating this, that, and the third. Talking about confederacies and chopping off half of California and stuff like this. Pay attention to the rhetoric.
It lasted 4 years. 100,000 people died. Some 500,000 were displaced. Those people lost everything. Yugoslavia was drowned in the bloods of thousands of innocent people and destroyed forever. You might wonder how we let that happen. How could we let things get so much out of control? That was because we didn't realize who were the real enemies, the enemies of the Yugoslav people as a whole. Instead, we were brainwashed into buying the story that we, the people, are the enemies of each other, while our true enemies were advancing with their sick, demented agenda, which had as the ultimate goal the total and unlimited power. This brings me to present times, the year 2020, and to you, American people. Unless you were living under the rock, you might have noticed that something very strange and vicious is happening in your country. But you're not exactly sure what it is and where it came from.
And this is true. Most people don't even know the history, and this is recent history. They haven't been paying attention. And as soon as people sound the alarms and they start talking about the similarities, the exceptionalism takes over. Oh, that can't happen. No way. Not in America. That can't happen. Well, she's talking about it.
Because the last time you checked, you were one nation under God, a country of free, independent individuals with equal rights under the law and core values of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. All of a sudden, there is protesting, rioting, arson, murder, destruction of public and private property, and lots of people screaming how unbelievably racist and unjust America is. And before you even manage to prepare your morning coffee and turn the TV on, once united Americans are at each other's throat, and a bunch of nice and caring people on TV are telling you how you should accept the violence and hatred against Americans because you deserve it.
And the crazy thing about this is we're all trying to act as though this is all normal. Every news channel you get on, every mainstream media program that you'll get on and see, they talk in terms as though things are normal. They will treat government positions that are acting untoward as normal. Well, if you just do this, if you just do that, if you vote out this, if you vote out that, if you stand up and send a paper into this. I don't know about you, but the last few months I've seen a lot of things that haven't been normal, even in government. I don't know.
If you have paid attention to what happened in Yugoslavia, I hope you have realized by now that your true enemies are not your fellow Americans. The ones who are, they want you to hate each other and to kill each other, while they're taking away your constitutional rights, your freedoms, and your country, your heritage, your way of life, and the future of your children.
So I'm going to leave it right there for now because I've been on for quite a bit tonight and I got some other things to do. But I just wanted to leave you with a little bit of that. If you want to see this, it's on YouTube. It's under, if you look at it, it's under Wow, this woman issues a warning. It's on Viable TV. So if you go over to YouTube and you search Viable TV, VIABLE TV, subscribe to that and you'll see her. She's in a black tank top and you can finish it off. The video is about 22 minutes left, and she explains a little bit about how things went down in her country and around Europe during the 90s. And I talked to you guys about, the Ceausescus in Romania, and how that all started and went down. Remember, most of these things that take place are from people that are democratically elected, and they get certain powers and they learn how to manipulate the systems that put them in place. And then we start getting into divisions. But I encourage you guys all to watch the video, check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. I appreciate you all for coming out and listening tonight. I did record this particular episode. I'm going to try and get some of these on YouTube, as most of this is still new. I just want to remind you all that these shows will be live on my Mixcloud channel soon, because on Mixcloud I like to get my break time in there with music, and I get copyrighted here on Facebook where they want to silence everything and take it off. On Mixcloud I'm licensed, so I can play music all I want over there, and that's where most of my podcasts will be. And then what I will do is I will edit the videos and edit the podcast to eliminate the music, and then put those on the Facebook posts after they happen and on the YouTube channel. But be sure to check out Freeze Frame Radio on Facebook, because my DJ Frosty Freeze page is going to be down. Going to be doing things strictly through Freeze Frame Radio, so be sure to come over there and check that out. Get on Twitter at FRadio76 and Instagram Freeze Frame Radio 76. I appreciate you all. Thanks for stopping in. Heidi, I see you. Congratulations. I saw the Packer video earlier today with you and Vince. I love you guys. I miss you guys. I appreciate you for stopping in. I'm going to see if I can get on here tomorrow if I got some time and spend some time with you at about 7 o'clock or so. Until then, stay safe, mask up, and we'll see you on the next one. Later.
Your girlfriend's favorite DJ, DJ Frosty Freeze.